Welcome to the Wine Hour with Jay. This is my new podcast. No, it's not. I have a new background because I don't have any cool geek stuff here. I'm on the road, and this is my mobile setup, and it is what it is. And we're just gonna go. We're just gonna go with it. But today on the Story Geeks podcast, our weekly hangout show is going down right now, and today we are talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League. A bunch of people are talking about this. We're going to join in and talk about it too. If you got comments, please leave them down below. We'd love to hear what your thoughts about this film are. And we also would love to just enter a discussion with you about this film and everything that's going on in this film. We were just joking in the chat that we could probably go on for about 8 hours on a 4-hour movie. We're not going to do that. We're going to try to keep it to an hour, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, let us know in the chat if you're here. I already saw that that Dustin dropped in. Dustin, what's up? Glad you're here with us. But let's get some of my co-hosts on. You guys know me. I'm Jay Sherer. I am a host on this channel pretty frequently. And joining me today, the first person I'll introduce from the Story Geeks team, Tim Wozni. Tim,
hey.
Tim has improved his background, and my background has gotten worse. We swapped background, maybe. Your background was better than this. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing all right. I one-shot the Snyder Cut, did it on Saturday afternoon, had lunch over it, did some work over it, built Legos over it, and built more Legos over it. And it was a delightful way to spend an afternoon.
I don't think there's a lot of people out there that can say that they built Legos while watching the Snyder Cut. So you're winning, man. You
Absolutely
are winning.
The way to go.
Yeah, some more hosts. We have Sandra Demas.
Hi.
What's up, Sandra? How are you today?
Swell.
You're representing LA with your hat. I like that.
I am. What's up?
What's up, Kimberly? Good to see you here. I hope you have some good thoughts on Justice League, by the way. I also have the next person I'm going to introduce. Is really fun because we haven't had him on the show in a really long time, and he was my co-host for the longest time. Started the podcast with me, basically. Daryl Smith is on the show today. What's up, Daryl? You're back.
How's it going? I'm back.
You're back.
Back for once, anyway.
Yeah, the reason why Daryl had to come back for this was because we had spent a lot of time talking about the Justice League. I'm going to be calling it that the whole show because someone else called that. That's hilarious. Well, too bad, man. Buckle in because I'm using it.
So bad.
Then I'm going to call it the Justice League.
Fine too. So we did a lot of shows on that, and so Daryl had to come back and talk about that. So good to see you again, Daryl. Everything going well with you?
Yeah, going well. Just taking care of my family, surviving COVID, doing all that stuff. So.
All the things. One more person to introduce, Mike. There he is. Yeah. By far, so competing with Sandra for best color hair. Hands down.
You mean I'm not?
Sandra was coming to play, so I was like, I gotta dye my hair quick.
Yeah. Exactly. Had to be done.
This whole time I thought it was just lighting.
No.
It's just COVID and boredom.
I love it.
Mike, can you tell the folks where you're from?
I am from, you may know me from the Superhero Show, a podcast that comes out every week where we watch and review literally every single TV show based on a comic book or comic book property. There's 1,000, you guys. We started when there was 4. We were like, we should do this. Now there's 1,000 every week.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's completely ridiculous and it's too much. But go listen to Mike's show. We met Mike way back in what was it, 2019 or 2018 at the Long Beach Comic Con.
Yeah, I think 2018, 2019 Long Beach Comic Con. And me and one of my co-hosts Ryan were just wandering around, and we saw you had mics, and we went, "You have a podcast?" You're like, "Do you guys want to guest?" We're like, "Yes." And then
that was awesome.
Daryl reminded me before we recorded. I think we started guessing who was going to die in Endgame.
And I was
right.
Just to go back and state for the record, I was right.
You were correct. Yeah. It is now official. By the way, we have to answer this question for Kimberly, and I had asked this question on my Instagram. But how many parts did you watch the new Zack Snyder cut in? It's 4 hours long. So how many sessions did you spend, Sandra? How many did you spend on this one?
I watched it in a day, but I think I watched it maybe in 3 parts.
Okay,
Not
bad.
intentional. It was like I was eating, then I had to get back to work, and so yeah.
Not bad at all. Daryl, what about you?
One time, straight through.
I was one time straight through as well. Mike, what about you?
2. I watched some Friday night, some Saturday night.
And Tim, how about you?
I did it in one setting.
With Legos.
And just with Legos, working on a Saturn V rocket. Really stoked about that. But yeah, one setting straight through Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and Amy Wozni had asked you just now, what were you building? So there you go. That has been revealed. That was the secret plug we were going to back.
Uh-oh, did we lose Jay?
We might have lost Jay.
Well, let's carry on.
Completely out. So
there he is.
I'm back. So you know, I'm having a couple issues with my Wi-Fi, clearly. So hopefully those won't continue and you guys can hear me and see me. But in the case that I, for some reason, don't show up, Sandra, I'm sure will take over and do a great But before we jump in today, I do want to let you know that we do reserve spots for our Patreon supporters so they can join us in these weekly hangouts. We would love for you to support the show and join in when you can. For more info on how to do that, please visit thestorygeeks.com. So let's dive into it, guys. Let's talk about the Justice League. First up, we already did one lightning round because Kimberly had a good question for us. We did a lightning round question. I've got 2 more lightning round questions for you. The first is for Daryl's favorite term. Do you prefer the Justice League or do you prefer the Zack Snyder Justice League? Which one is better, Sandra?
Snyder Cut for sure.
Snyder Cut for sure. Mike, which one is better?
Yep.
I turned off the Justice League after 25 minutes, so I guess I gotta go with Snyder Cut.
Begrudgingly going with Snyder on that, it sounds like. Daryl, what about you? Which one's better?
I don't even know why you're asking this question. It doesn't seem like a contest. Obviously, Snyder's cut is better.
Tim, what about you?
I'm going to also have to say Snyder Cut. And Mike, you made it farther than apparently Zack Snyder did. So, I mean, credit there where that's due.
So, and I have a quick shout out to everybody as we answer this next question. I want to know, everybody in the chat, which one do you like better? Do you like the Joss Whedon version or do you like the Zack Snyder version? Hit that up in the chat. We will talk to you guys about that. Now I have a much more difficult question, and I asked this question on my Instagram account too. So by the way, if you want to follow me on Instagram, sometimes I put out stuff about comic books or comic book movies. But I asked the question, here's where it gets really, really, really interesting. Do you prefer Joss Whedon's first Avengers movie, or do you prefer the Zack Snyder Justice League? This is where it gets really, really interesting. So, Daryl, what do you think? Which one do you prefer, Joss Whedon's Avengers or Zack Snyder's Justice League?
I'd probably have to go with Avengers, just because I think I cared about those characters more than I cared about the characters in Justice League.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to go either way. I've had problems with Zack Snyder's filmmaking, and I was a huge Joss Whedon fan back in the Buffy and Angel days, but everything that's coming to light about him now, I have a hard time standing behind him. But I think just judging the movies on their own merits, I'd go with Avengers.
Okay, Daryl goes Avengers. Tim, what about you?
I think I'd also have to land on Avengers there, just from the same reasons that Daryl said. It's you care about those characters more, and the MCU set up each one of those. At least the trio between Tony Stark and Thor and Captain America, they set them up with at least one film of their own before landing down in the Avengers. And for me, that just took it. That was way. You're just already plugged in so much more, and rather than introducing 3 heroes in your title film, who are all now are going to, or at least were planned on having their own franchises.
Okay, so you go Avengers too. We got 2 votes Avengers. Sandra, what do you think?
Totally Avengers. I mean, you have
Really?
more character development at that point, and I feel like even though I really loved Snyder Cut, and I know I think it was Daryl who said he has issues with Zack Snyder. Like, The Watchmen is one of my favorite comic book films. So,
Same.
but yeah, I definitely have to go with Avengers. We just got more story there.
I feel like having had a previous conversation with Mike, he's also going to go Avengers. But what do we got, Mike?
It's a great prediction. I think Zack Snyder did a really good job on the credits in Watchmen, and he was awesome in Dawn of the Dead. End of good things Snyder has done. I think even if we didn't have the lead up to the Avengers by far destroys Snyder Cut because there's characters, so there is something to care about.
I'm going against all of you. I still have issues with Joss Whedon's style of filmmaking. I do not believe the stakes are that interesting, and I am more interested in a movie that's trying to do something interesting than a bubblegum popcorn escapism flick. And I'm putting that with a stamp on it. And you guys can argue with me all day long, but we're going to keep moving on. But what we got from Kimberly says that between Justice League and Avengers, she likes the Avengers too. I'm standing alone on this hill, by the way. When I did the poll on Instagram, there was only like 4 people who agreed with me. Everybody else was like, "We love the Avengers." I'm like, "All right, fine. It is what it is."
To be fair, Joss had more of a head start on the Avengers than Snyder did on Justice League. So, like, there's cheesiness in the Avengers, just like there is in his version of Justice League. Yeah. But what came before it was really, really good and made you care about those characters. So he had a big boost. It's not.
That's 100% true. That's 100% true. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, one of the things that Daryl and I used to talk about a lot, we talked about this with both Michael Young from That Nerd Soul, is that Warner Brothers has messed with these films so much that it's hard to tell whose vision is actually showing up. There were calls this week for there to be the Ayer cut because his Suicide Squad movie was completely messed with. He said he shot he shot 3 to 5 different films. And the one that made it on screen is not the one he would have put on screen. So we definitely have a Frankenstein of a DCEU and a very compelling put together MCU. So it is hard, but I'm one of those people that I do think that Zack Snyder needs help in the storytelling department. However, I like what he's trying to do. A lot of times I'm like, if only we could have somebody come in and it would help in that department, it would kill.
I think what he does well, and I know Mike and I are probably going to throw hands later because of what he said about the Watchmen. That's fine. I'll take you. I think what he does. Oh no! I think what he does well is setting a mood like you would expect in a music video, because those are the moments that I really loved in the Snyder Cut, and what I really loved in Watchmen is when there's no dialogue and it's just the story unfolding and set to music. And I know everyone's like, enough with the slow-mo, but I know he gets excessive, but I feel like that's where his strength is. And then if he had someone, like you're saying, come alongside him and help him, because he's got a beautiful aesthetic and a great way to tell story through music. But if he had the dialogue a little better and like not so many mother boxes.
I like that stuff too. I think he does have a great visual aesthetic, but he can't tell a concise story. That's the only thing. I mean, I'm all for a 4-hour Justice League movie because I love the Justice League, but pretty consistently, the best version of Zack Snyder's movies are the director's cuts because he just can't seem to tell a concise story.
Right.
Well, and everyone who doesn't like BVS should really go watch the Ultimate Edition and then decide whether or not you like it, because it's some of the major. Now, granted, let me say this: this is my one of my major criticisms about Zack Snyder is that I agree with everything Sandra said, because Sandra and I are fans of what he's doing visually. I think he's one of the best visual directors there is. However, he's also has the sensibilities of a 12-year-old boy. So there are times I think he's grown. This Justice League was better than some of his former things, but it's like, if I'm going to put a hero on screen, I better show his rock hard abs. And if I'm going to, put a female on screen, she better look sexy. It's like, it's one of these things where you're kind of like, okay, yeah, we get it. You're a 12-year-old boy and it's fine. So he's really, what I think that is it's really living into the fact that he cared deeply about comics. And he can't tell a short story because he's so involved in these long serial stories. He's trying to cram all of that stuff that he loves in there, and it's just obviously too much. So, yeah,
I think having an editor would be so helpful.
Yeah.
And somebody who understands how like humans interact. I think he used to be really interesting visually, and then with 300 and Watchmen and Sucker Punch, and like now it's like, bro, we've seen you slow things down, and instead of like, if everything's slow, nothing is. No, if everything's slow, everything feels even slower. And I agree that the music video vibe worked really well with Aquaman holding the bottle, walking towards the waves. Inarguably badass visual shot. Like you could see that on posters and cool. But then the fact that he used that vibe, just beating us down. He's like a 12-year-old. Not just that he's like ooh rock hard abs or women looking sexy. It's a 12-year-old boy who's also just read Nietzsche, and it's just like, isn't everything dark more important?
That's very true. That's very true. But I still like it. I still like it a lot, and I still like it better than I like Joss Whedon stuff. And I know that's like in geek worlds, people are like, "How can you say that?" But I just think that what Joss Whedon is doing is almost always pure bubblegum, and he always avoids going to the deeper questions that I think are more fascinating. Even if it's a 12-year-old asking a question about Nietzsche, at least we're asking about Nietzsche. So let's move on to the plot, because the plot of Joss Whedon's cut and Snyder's cut, the plot is actually the same. Steppenwolf is attempting to appease Darkseid and bring about Darkseid's evil plot to destroy the Earth, which means the main difference here is basically character development. It comes down to how the characters were portrayed on screen, and the differences between these two cuts is really about them. In Snyder's film, Cyborg, Flash, and Wonder Woman get way more attention than do Batman and Superman. So I just have a question for you guys in terms of having seen this 4-hour movie with a lot of things going on, but very similar things to what we already saw in the 2-hour version of this movie. Which character do you think improved, got the best story in this new version? Sandra, what do you think?
Oh, I love Cyborg in the Snyder cut. I feel and I think it's interesting. I'm curious as to why Joss Whedon completely stripped Cyborg, and it's funny that he's a cyborg, but he stripped him of his humanity completely. And in the Snyder cut, we see him before he's cyborg. We see how even then, before he has all of the tech, that he is philanthropic. He is trying to help his friend by hacking into the system and improving her grades. And then we see that shining through when he does have like the ability to hack into a bank and give a struggling single mom some money to survive. You know, she got evicted and all this stuff. And you see his relationship with his mom, his relationship with his dad breaking down. There's so much more to Cyborg that all we see, I think he's introduced in the Joss Whedon Justice League when he's on the roof with Batman. Is that the scene? And he's just introduced like, oh yeah, here's this guy Cyborg. And so, you know, I loved how Wonder Woman was portrayed as well. I felt like she was stronger, more badass, but with Cyborg, he was a big standout for me. I really liked how his character was so completely more robust than we saw in the Justice League.
Yeah, totally. So if you're in the comments section too, I would love to hear what your thoughts are. If you thought there was a specific character that you really resonated with in this particular cut, let us know in those comments. Daryl, what do you think? Who's the character that you really resonated with in this version?
Well, I'm glad Sandra said Cyborg, because I think if you're talking about a member of the Justice League, that kind of is the right answer. I was actually really appreciating how much more we got of the supporting characters in this. So like Lois Lane and Hippolyta and Silas Stone, and honestly, even Steppenwolf. Like, not just the fact that his face looked better, but there was more motivation for him to be doing what he was doing, and getting to see Darkseid, getting to see him interact with Desaad, and kind of the desperation behind him was good. But I thought the supporting cast was kind of shining improvement in this for me over the theatrical version.
Very nice. I like that too. Yeah, that was. There is a really cool. There's a lot of time spent on them. To Mike's point about how many things are you going to spend time on, obviously. But Mike, what do you think? What was your favorite character here?
Yeah, I think I don't even know where this fondness I have for Ezra Miller came from, because I was going through his filmography, and I think I've only seen him in a couple of things, like Perks of Being a Wallflower, and maybe he just imprinted me hard there. But I think he stands out for me because everybody else is so grimdark and brooding, and man, it's nice to have some levity and to know. I didn't know Snyder could write jokes. I thought he was kind of anti, and I still think he is kind of anti. But to have this kind of bumbling superhero, I really enjoyed. He not only was he fun, but he also worked as that audience stand-in the whole time, doing everything. He's like, this is crazy, and I think he sells that so well. I like that Cyborg got an arc here where he didn't in Justice League, but that's like. # not my cyborg. My cyborg smiles and has fun and says booyah.
Well, that's a good point, actually.
The levity with the Flash was good because it was a little more tempered in this than it was in the Joss Whedon version. In that version, he was still trying to go for levity, but he was like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Like, he was just super goofy and kind of stupid. In this, it was more endearing, I think.
Yeah.
Joss Whedon's got a lot of dad jokes. He likes to work in there. Tim, what do you think? Which character did you enjoy in this one?
For me, it landed with sort of in between Cyborg and Flash, and for the same reasons that we've already mentioned. Just that Cyborg got something that felt meaningful, way more so than in the original cut. And one of the things that I really liked was that whenever he was in the tech world, whenever he dived into a computer or the mother boxes or with Batman's aircraft, he wasn't Cyborg anymore. And I just thought that was a really interesting little touch, that in Cyborg's mind, Cyborg is his whole self still. And that's where, for Cyborg, his identity lies, is in that understanding of his own whole self. And so I thought that was just a really cool and like wholesome or meaningful, I'm not sure what the right adjective there is, but just really sort of touching characteristic of Cyborg. And then with Flash, same thing as what Daryl just said. It was nice to see him not just be a joke like he was in the Joss cut, where describing him as Shaggy is perfect, because he just kind of bumbled around and said a quippy line and did a thing. And with this, he's so much more fleshed out. And yes, he does have a lot of quippy, goofy lines, but he also has a lot of meaningful, important observations or actions that drive the story or the plot, the action, what's going on.
Yeah, very cool.
I it's also worth pointing out that, I feel like it's also, I lost my train of thought. I feel like it is also worth pointing out that we get a much more consistent Bruce Wayne in this version. Because you can pick out the difference between Snyder's Bruce Wayne and Whedon's Bruce Wayne night and day. And it's really disjointing in the original version. So this is way better in that regard too.
Yes, I agree with that 100%. I agree with everything you guys have actually said. The only thing that I wanted to bring up too is that I was far more impressed with Wonder Woman in this film. I thought Wonder Woman was amazing. I actually felt that Wonder Woman was sort of the glue holding everybody together, especially in the absence of Superman. And honestly, like some of the best scenes in the entire film in terms of the fight scenes are Wonder Woman's scenes. Like, Cyborg is an awesome character, but he doesn't have a lot of great fight scenes per se. And the extended version of Wonder Woman's introduction is just gorgeous, all the way from the first frame to the last. It's amazing. So I was really impressed with that. I actually felt I was very impressed with the fact that for a 12-year-old boy director, I thought he actually treated Wonder Woman a lot better than Whedon treated Wonder Woman. Because I think the one joke that they had that was let's call it a sexual harassment joke, for lack of a better joke, was when they touched the mouse together. But that was almost like a joke of like, yeah, Whedon made you guys like almost like you were going to be lovers, Batman and Wonder Woman, and I'm just going to throw out a joke to say that's not happening here. Like that's just that's awkward, which I think was really good, because I hated that part of the other story, could not stand it. And of course, you had the whole joke where Flash falls on top of Wonder Woman in the Whedon cut, and so it's just he removed a lot of those things that to me exemplified Gal Gadot as what Gal Gadot was in the Wonder Woman film. So it just seemed more consistent with that to me, and I like that a lot better. So I just wanted to put a shout out there to Wonder Woman.
The establishing shot with her when she's on the statue, but you see the statue first. Again, it's the aesthetic, and it's how visually beautiful Snyder makes things. That shot, I was like, oh, I love it. And I have to say, going back to Flash really quick, that scene where, is it Iris?
Ezra.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Ezra? You mean talking about, which one are you talking about?
No. The female,
the character. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's Iris. So that whole scene, the car scene, again, it's the music video that's happening there, but I think it's Song of the Siren, and it's all slow-mo, and she's flying in the air, and I thought it was so beautiful. And I have to tell you, I thought about his daughter, and I thought about what he must have felt if he had looked at that, whether he worked on that before or after, if he felt like, look, here's a moment where, because of Flash's ability, he's able to save this woman, and like the slowing down of time, and really like looking at her, and he obviously there's admiration there that he has for her, and so it was just such a powerful scene because of that. At least the way that I was viewing it, I thought, oh gosh, like I wonder how much this means to him, if it means something and has deeper significance because of this, like in Flash's ability to save Iris from the inevitable, what would have been the inevitable. So yeah, that's really, I love that scene.
Really good point. And before I jump into the next question, actually, Kimberly had a great point too. She says, I didn't realize how powerful Cyborg is. And I felt the same way. I was shocked that he kept leveling up throughout the movie, right? Which is sort of a background kind of subplotish kind of thing. But I did not realize. I've not read a lot of Cyborg comics. And so for me, it was really shocking to see how powerful that dude was getting. It was like, well, this is amazing. So that was really cool. I want to transition into a couple of different storytelling questions here. One is, there have been two giant issues throughout the DCEU. I brought one of them up earlier, and we've already talked about the other one. And the first is executive involvement, because if you go back and do a deep dive like Daryl and I have done into what's happened with these films, there's a lot of Warner Brothers getting involved. The other thing is that, and this is partially because the first comment about the executive involvement, the vision and selling the overarching vision across all of the films. And obviously we talked about this, but in the MCU, they have Kevin Feige, and Kevin Feige oversees everything that's happening in the MCU. It was a little bit easier for me to see what the original vision of the DCEU was actually meant to be, having watched this film, because this film essentially sets up the Aquaman film. It gives us all the scenes they need to present that, to go take off with that film. It probably pitches a new Batman film that includes Leto's Joker. There's at least one Flash film that's introduced here, if not multiple Flash films. in a shocking reveal that we had no idea was going to happen, Martian Manhunter is probably going to get a film or at least be involved in the next Justice League sequel. So, not to mention there would be more Justice League sequels here, obviously, because there's a whole dark side story that's not even told. And I'm sure that I'm missing some of the stories that are set up here in this 4-hour version of this one. So my question for you guys is this, and Mike, I'll start with you. Feige's vision is beloved by everybody, and I don't even think I've ever heard a major complaint about Kevin Feige and what he's done with the MCU. There's people who don't prefer the MCU, but there's like nobody that's willing to be like, "Well, what a dumb idea! He's ruining everything." It's just not happening. He's doing amazing. Right. But Snyder's vision has been incredibly controversial. It's been, and of course, we talked about executives messing and stuff. But people either love this vision or they hate this vision. So would you want to see the DCEU follow Snyder's vision, which, by the way, I have to give a shout out to Christopher Nolan, who's a producer on a lot of Snyder's films and actually chose Snyder to come in and take the reins there. So there's a shout out to him as well. But would you want to see Snyder's vision for the DCEU come to light, or should they just hand this off to somebody else and move on? I'm going to start with Mike on this one.
Yeah, I think like they've been playing with scared money since Snyder took over. Warner Brothers has, because they didn't have, and it took a while, but Kevin Feige had like an interesting position that he is the executive and a creative force, where Snyder, I know he produces things, but he does have to bow down to bigger Warner Brothers, right?
Yep.
And they the whole time are like, we're going to be different from the MCU. Oh fuck, we're not close enough to being like the MCU. And right. So you can't make interesting creative decisions based on fear of how you're going to be compared to your competitor. And that's, I'm again not a Snyder fan, but I would rather watch his singular vision over 5 movies than 2 steps forward, 1 step back of a bunch of people who only want to probably sell toys and like Burger King tie-ins. But at this point, I say put it to bed. It's interesting because for a while I was like, oh, they're doing well. I thought Aquaman was dumb and fun. It was silly in its own way. I loved the first Wonder Woman movie, and I really enjoyed Shazam. So I was like, I think they're figuring it out. And then they came out with 1984. So like, as a company, I don't think they know how to make movies. Like, I don't know if they know how to tell stories. It's bananas. They have some of the best characters and just are like, they get one and then get excited and drop the ball.
It is super, super, super bizarre. And I also want to hear from anybody in the comments too, if you got thoughts about whether or not you want to see Snyder continue with this vision. But yeah, no, I actually agree with everything that you said. I'm a fan. I like Snyder and I like watching what he's trying to do. But I agree with all the things that you said, and the executive messing around with it have been completely ridiculous. Tim, what about you? What do you think? Should Snyder keep this up, or should we just move on? Should we move and maybe throw out who you think you would hand it off to, by the way?
I don't know if it needs to be Snyder or someone else, but I think Warner Brothers is spending too much time trying to play catch up. And I've been watching For All Mankind over the last few weeks, and mild spoilers, that show revolves around the Russians getting to the moon first and what NASA might have looked like if they were playing catch up. And if you compare that to what Warner Brothers is doing with the MCU, it's almost parallel. And it feels like there's just a lot of panic. And like you were saying, Mike, we want to be different than the MCU, but we also want to be the MCU. Yeah. And I think they just need to let that ship sail and say, we are not going to catch the MCU, in part because they're like 16 movies ahead at this point, and rest on the properties that they do have and make those feel special. And if it means that the DCEU is all over the place emotionally, between, like you're saying, Aquaman being kind of a goofy film, and for sure the Flash movie is gonna follow suit. They're not gonna do an about face on the personality that they have set up for Ezra Miller, and all of a sudden he's edgy and dark. I just can't see that happening or working. And they've done such a good job with the first Wonder Woman movie. And I know that 1984 has other sentiments to it. But I think they should rest on the eclecticness of the group of heroes that they have and say, okay, we're going to let Aquaman be a bit of a goofy rock star. We're going to let Ezra Miller and the Flash be awkward and fun and playful is maybe the right word. We're going to let Wonder Woman just be the awesomeness that she was in the first Wonder Woman, and we'll see how we correct from 84. And we should let Batman be dark and brooding and edgy, and Superman be a little bit aloof. And they should run in those directions really hard. And if that means that the Justice League feels really dark with Snyder and then feels very different with another director, maybe that's okay because the whole universe is going to be that way anyways.
Totally. Well, I'm going to bring Sandra back in before I ask Daryl because I'm curious as to Sandra's thoughts. What do you think, Sandra?
Like whether they should continue with Snyder? I don't think so. I mean, you know who I'm going to say should direct it because he should direct everything. I'm just kidding. I was going to say Edgar Wright, but because I'm still upset about Ant-Man. But no, you know what? I think Shazam had a good vibe to it, and that one was a fun ride. So I agree with what Tim was saying. I feel like Warner Brothers is continuing to look at what Marvel's doing, and they're not paying attention to their own lane. So that is a big problem when you're even in life, when you're paying attention to your competitor, you're not paying attention to what you bring to the table and what's unique about you. And so these characters are amazing characters. There should be no reason why their movies suck, but time and time again, they suck. The only one that I actually enjoyed I mean, I don't know what you're going to say about this, but I actually enjoyed Birds of Prey. I thought that was a fun ride. There were some really great moments, and especially to see female characters in that way, I really enjoyed that. But I don't know why they just keep messing up. You know, they think, and I think they're just like Tim was saying, they're trying to play catch up. If they didn't build the foundation that MCU did, then they're already starting from a weaker position. But then that's fine. You don't have to have this, phases and phases of films to create some great films. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings. It's only 3 films, but they did what they needed to do, or ignoring The Hobbit. And so, I think if they just built what they're planning to do, like just build that and focus on that and get better directors and stop fussing with it. Like all these execs keep jumping in and like they see too many cooks in the kitchen. Oh my gosh, it's such a mess because everyone's giving their 2 cents. And ultimately it's leading to this, muddied story and characters getting, not having enough time to actually be developed. So hopefully they stop paying attention to MCU and they start just paying attention to what they have and go to the source material.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I have a theory about why some of that's actually happening. But Daryl, what do you think? Should this be Snyder's universe, or should we just move on?
Move on. I mean, I'm glad we got this movie because I wanted to see what this movie could have been. So I'm super happy that it happened. But yeah, I'm ready to move on. I don't think he's got it in him to foster a shared universe. I don't think he has that skill set. And also, I kind of don't want a shared universe. Like, to be honest, when the credits rolled on Avengers Endgame, I'm like, okay, I'm satisfied. I got my shared universe experience. From here on out, I don't care. Just make good movies, And so I don't even think we need a DC EU per se. And this same problem exists in the comics. If you read DC Comics too, since the 80s, they've been trying to reconcile.
Oh, Daryl, pause.
Sense
right
of
in the
it.
middle. Oh, there he goes. You're back.
Sorry. I was saying that in the comics, this same problem exists. Like, since the 80s, they've been trying to reconcile their shared universe and make sense of continuity. And it's just, a frustrating exercise. Like, just tell good stories. So a couple things. One, if you want to see what something similar to Snyder's vision for the next Justice League movies would have been, look into this.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so this is a video game as well as a comic. You can read this on DC Universe. I think the DC Universe Infinite app, the whole thing is there. So you can sign up for a month and read this. There's a ton of these stories. And his vision is real similar to this story. It's basically just this apocalyptic future. And it's a cool idea, but it's already here. So you can check that out. And then in the movie world, I want to see other voices. Like Matt Reeves has a Batman movie coming. I cannot wait to see what he does with Batman. I'm like, let's bring more people in. You know, James Gunn's Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, forget the shared universe, forget the DCEU. Don't be reactionary to Marvel anymore. Just hire good storytellers and make good movies. That's all I care about.
Yeah, and so just picking up on Sandra's point and a little bit on your point, Daryl, because you're kind of towing the line with what I was about to say, and that is, I think that if you take a look at what Snyder set out to do, I believe he's making. If you talk to anybody who's like a DC Comics fan, generally speaking, they're usually a fan of what Zack Snyder is doing. He's making films for DC Comics fans in a way. But that's not mass market anymore. DC Comics fans are not as mass market as you would think. Marvel doesn't make movies for Marvel Comics fans. They make movies for everybody, right? The stories they apply to everybody. I did a talk one time. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I did a talk one time at a university, and it was about how our culture defines superheroes and villains and what's the difference between them, and how can you tell if Killmonger is a villain or is he a hero, or how do you make that decision, right? And I'm giving this whole talk and I'm using Killmonger as an example. I'm like, how many of you saw Black Panther? And there's not that many people in the room. There's like maybe 12 people in the room. And people are just like kind of looking. They're like, I think I saw that one. So we, in this group, we know what the shared universe is. We know that there's all these movies built up. We watch them all. I tried not to watch WandaVision because I was like, it's just too much. And then I watched it anyways. But the point is that I think Zack Snyder basically said, I'm going to make a movie that pays a lot of homage to a lot of different comic books. It's an amalgamation of a lot of different things. I'm going to show the characters in ways that I think I've seen them in the comics, mostly in the 90s, let's say. And I'm going to pay homage to those comic books that I love. But he's not making movies that like the Chinese audience can just go watch. Like Marvel's trying to hit global audiences here. We're going to tell stories that are applicable to everybody. So as much as I would like to see, I think I'm one of the only people on this podcast maybe, but I would like to see Snyder's vision be realized. I think what he's doing is interesting. I don't think he's firing on all cylinders, but I think it's very interesting. I would tell you that I think it's more interesting than what the MCU is doing. It is. To me, it is. I think the MCU can be pretty bubblegum and kind of just simplistic. So for me, I like the risks that he was trying to take. So I agree with I don't know who this is. This is a Facebook user comment that says Snyder should probably get to see his vision, but won't get to. So knowing the WB, they'll probably try to continue Snyder's vision without his approval or consent and totally drop the ball and screw Zack over, which we've actually like legitimately seen them do. I know that there's been a lot of controversy in how that actually played itself out, but that we know that that's actually happened. So I might be the only one that wants to see Snyder's vision carried out. But I don't think, and this is to some more of what Mike has said and to what some of the rest of you have said, I don't think that Snyder's vision can actually be carried out in a cinematic going to a movie theater way. I think you basically have to turn it into a serialized story that is on TV. Like it can't be done in the way that they're trying to do it. Just as an example, the Ultimate Edition of BVS is decent. I'm not saying it's awesome. It's decent. But if you watch, I say it's even good because I enjoy it. But if you watch the theatrical version, they had to chop it down because you had to get people in seats. And people want to go spend 2 hours in the theater and eat popcorn. They don't want to spend 3 hours in a theater unless it's like the event of a lifetime, which let's face it, that's not what this is, except for maybe DC Comics fans or people like me who just care about this.
But
can I go back and say something? Because I committed a cardinal sin in the world of podcasting. So for those that are just listening to this and not watching, I showed something and didn't say what it was. I was showing the Injustice Gods Amongst comic. So video game and comic, Injustice: Gods Among Us. That's what I was talking about as a look at what Snyder was thinking.
Yeah, and that's
Go ahead,
he
Mike.
does see Superman inherently as the Injustice version, and it's interesting. Like the difference between Marvel and DC, right? Is Marvel it's who's Peter Parker, and DC is who's Batman, right? Like one cares about the human, one cares about, and Snyder's like they're gods, but the aloof I think spreads throughout all of them. And the best parts of the Snyder Cut was when Superman was back and with Lois. And I think it's because Henry Cavill and Amy Adams are great actors. The humanity that's shown through in those couple scenes late in the film could have been sprinkled throughout all of it, because basically all his heroes are aloof except for the Flash. And I was like, I would like to see bits of humanity in them caring about people. And how Clark went from being very human and caring to very like above it all felt jarring to me. So I don't know. I think he gets Batman. I don't think he gets Superman. And I think for modern audiences in general, like I think there's something that could be so aspirational and beautiful about this giant, powerful alien who, because he's good and compassionate, does not constantly think, what if I can kill everybody? But Snyder only sees him as... Snyder sees Clark the way Lex Luthor sees Clark. He only sees the danger that he could be. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that is I was having a discussion with Josh Taylor, who joined us for the WandaVision episodes, and we were laughing because we kind of said Snyder keeps trying to compare Superman to Jesus Christ, and he clearly has no idea who Jesus Christ is. Like it's like, yeah, exactly. And so it's like, it's very, I think that there is something at the heart of Zack Snyder's filmmaking that either hits you or it does not hit you. And by the way, it's almost always in the moments, like Sandra has talked about. Yeah. It's not in the overarching like narrative. Because the overarching narrative, I think, feels very cold, to your point, Mike. It doesn't feel like it feels aloof. And I can actually see why Nolan picked him, because Nolan can be criticized in the same way. Mm-hmm. These are two guys who are saying, actually, I'm going to be a little bit more esoteric, and I'm going to create movies that at least they're trying to make it a thinker's movie, not a feeler's movie. But Snyder, what he does is he does this thing where he shoves in these moments that make you feel like they're supposed to be emotional. They don't always hit. One of the worst scenes in film history, that's a bold claim, is the Watchmen sex scene. Oh yeah, it's one of the worst. And why is it bad? I'll tell you why it's bad. Because he thinks he's filming something that is the best sex scene in the history of modern filmmaking, and it's less than good. It's less than decent. It's like barely good at all. And so my point is with Snyder is I think he's trying to make these kind of more esoteric movies, but he has these really emotional moments. But if he doesn't land those moments, he just loses people. And people are like, I don't get it. I don't. To your point, Mike, about being aloof. So I think that can sometimes happen with Snyder. So I say all of those things, but I still want to see his vision because I like it. But any other thoughts before we move on to our last question?
Well, I think that you're right in the sense that, and I would watch it to see Snyder's vision, but in a series. So if we can see that on HBO or Stars or whatever, I couldn't envision that happening. But
there's some talk about them releasing a comic as a follow-up to his movie.
Oh, yeah.
Here's
It'd be interesting.
Here's the thing. I think I would be totally down for that, Sandra. Here's the big problem: is that Feige, and someone else mentioned this might have been you, Mike, but somebody said like Feige doesn't get involved in the individual. He doesn't direct any of the individual films, right? You can't take. I don't think you can take Zack Snyder. I don't think his skill set is the oversight over an entire shared universe. I don't think that's his skill set. I think so. I like where his vision is, but I almost feel like they would be better served to bring somebody else in and say, hey, Zach, can you communicate your vision to us about what it is that you're thinking you're going to do and what stories you're going to follow? And then that person said, great. Now I'm going to oversee the shared universe, and you go make these specific films for me. That to me would be a much better way of handling DC EU, so to speak, because I don't think that he's the kind of guy. I think one of the reasons why I keep comparing what he's doing to like what DC fans like is I think he's the guy who goes to the comic book shop and talks with all the comic book nerds for hours on end about what's going on in the comics, right? But if you don't do that and you go to approach one of his movies, you're like, I'm super lost. Like this doesn't make any sense. So anyways, we'll go ahead and move on to the last question we have. And if anybody else has any questions for us in the chat, like definitely make yourself heard here. I'll start with you, Tim, since you've been off screen for a little while. On this channel, we consistently discuss the art of storytelling. So here's my question to you. If you loved Zack Snyder's Justice League, so I have a two-part question. If you loved it, maybe not Mike, but maybe for some of the rest of us, if you loved it, what about the art of his storytelling resonated with you? Or if you were indifferent or even disliked it, what about the art of this story did not work for you? So Tim, which side are you on? And what do you think worked and what do you think didn't work? And if you're in the comments, let us know what you think worked and what didn't work in this film as well.
I'm going to be on the first side of that and that I did like it. And one of the things that I really loved about it, and Fantastic Beasts did this for me, Blade Runner, the recent one, 2049, thank you, did this for me. I love a movie where I lose track of time in the process. And for me, that works better when the movies are long and feel, for want of a better phrase, slow, or maybe not rushed is better to put it. If it's characters that I'm interested in, a story that I like, a setting that I like, I am ready to sit there and be in it for as long as I can. And so for me, this was great. And I loved, and yes, this is perhaps a one-off, or at the very least, an infrequent thing that is going to happen, where it's like we've been dancing in between how this is serialized and how this is a single entity of film. But for me, that works. And I get that I'm a minority in that. But for me, that works. And I love just being able to sit in a world and experience that story as if I was lost in that world, not aware that I'm watching a movie.
That's cool. That's very cool. So Mike, I'll jump over to you. What do you think? Which side of this are you on? What do you like or dislike about the art?
I'm clearly on the it did not work for me. I think so. I like slow cinema. So the two movies I watched this weekend were First Cow and the Snyder Cut, and I compare them a lot because I watched them in the same period, but they're both in 4:3 ratio, so that was weird watching like a giant Instagram filter. And they're both really slow, but First Cow really dug. It's like a revisionist western about Gold Rush, Oregon, by Kelly Reichardt. It's amazing, and it's just this in-depth look at these two characters who are normally not the stars of a western film, a Chinese immigrant and a Jewish baker who works for trapper groups cooking. And so we really just dig into these two guys and their relationship with the land. And it is slow, but it is half the time of Snyder's movie, and you learn so much more about the characters, because I don't know if he knows how people work. I feel similarly to how I do about Nolan, though I like Nolan a little more, but I think they're good technical directors, but they're dog shit storytellers. And just digging into Snyder in this movie, the slow-mo thing, Wonder Woman fights the same as the Flash fights the same as Superman, and so the tension goes away. And I know the X-Men movies with Evan Peters did speed so cool that nobody else who had a speedster, they're like, I don't know what to do anymore, so we won't even try. But like, even the Flash TV show, I think, does speed cooler looking than this, and all of his heroes fought the same, and he wanted everything to look so big and epic that it all felt hollow to me. instead of choreographing really cool looking fights. The Wonder Woman fight in the bank at the beginning was the best fight, and the rest fell flat because it was all just like, look how cool they are, and never like, let's care about what they are. And it felt the most. It felt like the most excited he felt as a storyteller was the end. In the nightmare sequence, I was like, here's your movie, guy, because Deathstroke and Batman and Mira and Flash and Cyborg and Joker are all really different personalities, and in those 4 minutes he like pinned down how different they are versus his other 4 hours. Nobody felt that different, and this felt like a different kind of story. And I was like, I don't know if it's because it was newer, but there was a zest and a life there that was not in the rest of the movie. And it wasn't gray and dark, so maybe the color palette helped.
Hey, they're going to release a black and white version, so it's going to get grayer and darker.
Oh, Justice is gray. Great.
Yeah. You know what's funny? One of the reasons I actually invited Mike on the show, because he and I had a conversation separately, and I was like, "What do you think of Justice League?" He's like, "Oh, I don't like it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. Like, come on the show." Because one of the things I like to do is I like to get other people's opinions. Because as a storyteller, what this does for me is it reveals the types of stories that people are resonating with or not resonating with. And I think one of the things that I'm landing on, and I think it's really interesting that you say that you don't like Nolan or Snyder, is that I think they're different directors, but they're similar in that they almost seem like they're competing with ideas, not competing with characters and humans, right? And so I think that Snyder actually does something a little bit superior to Nolan in that he does create epic moments that focus in on creating a hero aesthetic for a character. So the introduction of Wonder Woman, for example, is brilliantly filmed and is like, wow, this is gorgeous, right? This Wonder Woman seems like an intimidating, interesting character. Now, whether or not you're ever able to connect with her at an emotional level is a completely different thing, right? So I like to have these conversations because it does reveal, if I think to myself, I love this film, well, what about it that I love? And I think that there's these ideas of gods and how they would function in real life is an interesting idea to me. But if it does miss the humanity part of it, then there's something lacking there. So I think that's really well articulated, Mike. Sandra, what do you think? What did you like about the art of the storytelling? What did you dislike about it, or anywhere in between?
Well, I would be on the side of liking it. I really enjoyed, again, those moments where and I love music. I'm listening to music pretty much all the time. So I think that's why they resonate. The scenes that are kind of like music videos, because that is kind of the most powerful way for me to get stories through music and through dance. So I really enjoyed those moments. Kimberly mentioned that she loved the nightmare scene, and honestly, that was so great. And I think what you said, Mike, about, I think it was you, Mike, that said about just how that was a totally different movie and everything was kind of locked in. So then maybe Snyder should do like short films, and that might be his ticket. It was really, really good, and I hope she's still watching. The birthday girl's watching, Mary. So hi, Mary. But I saw her on here that she was watching. Awesome. So yeah, I think that I did enjoy it. I feel like he did a good job in some moments. Justice League, like Joss Whedon's Justice League, I don't really remember key moments other than the bank scene with Wonder Woman. Everything else was just kind of, just noise to me. But I felt like Snyder at least created these moments of beautiful cinematography, and just beautiful moments with these characters, and seeing characters that we didn't get to see. Like, I loved seeing Cyborg. I felt like that alone, plus Jared Leto as a good Joker, was so good. I'm like, this is the Joker that I wanted to see. I really, really enjoyed him. I believed him. I wasn't distracted by what he was trying to do. So I think for those two things, like Cyborg and Joker, and that nightmare scene, I think those things really made the Snyder Cut stand out for me.
That's good. By the way, this is an exclusive, a special exclusive. So if any of you watch the other show that I do with Caleb Monroe's wife is the one who did the Joker's makeup for this film.
Ooh.
And we will be interviewing her to talk about that process and how that all came about. So stay tuned to future shows on the Art of Storytelling channel. Daryl, what did you think? Which side do you fall on, and what makes this good art or what makes this bad art? Which is, by the way, a very subjective question, and we realize that.
Yeah, I don't know. I hesitate to call it good art. What it did do for me that I loved is, if you can see my screen, you can see this wall of comic books behind me. And what it did for me is it gave me a comic book on screen, maybe better and more accurately than any DC movie has done before it. That doesn't mean it's the best DC movie. I'd still put The Dark Knight there for sure. But I think it kind of gave me the grandeur of a comic book better than a lot of these other movies had, like having Cyborg, having Wonder Woman, Flash, all of them together. Is it the best version of any one of those characters that we'll ever see? Probably not. But there was a lot of great payoff to being able to see it. And there were little moments he threw in too. Like at the end of the movie, we get to see this giant tank version of the Batmobile, which as a comic fan, I know that's from the Dark Knight Returns comic. And that's a Frank Miller thing. And there's all these little bits that he puts in there that if you're a comic fan, it's a whole lot of fun to find that stuff and to kind of see it represented on screen. If you're not a comic fan, maybe it's just a bunch of noise. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can't you be a comic fan and like good storytelling?
Well, yeah, and of course, and I love good storytelling, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think this is good art. I don't think Zack Snyder makes good art. But I think he makes things you can have fun watching. So, and I love that in a movie. Some movies I want to be good art.
Well,
some movies I want.
Question though, Daryl, is why is something that you like watching not good art? That's one question.
Well,
why are you wrong is the other question.
So by the way,
I like McDonald's, but that doesn't mean I'm eating good food. You know what I mean?
I guess, yeah, this is always, I mean, when it comes to art, the question is always, I just released a video on this channel, by the way. You can go back and watch it if you're interested, but I released a video on who's the best writer. But there was a key twist to that video. I said who's the best novel writer, it was focused on novels. And I said, by the number of books they've sold. Well, now I've totally changed the definition of what best means. Right?
That is a fallacy, mister.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. So Sandra says that doesn't mean best to me. Well, it means best to if you're comparing to who's selling the most books. So what we do is we tend to have this like this subjective language about how we talk about something. Oh, this isn't art, or this isn't that. And by the way, that's all fine and good. We should all have our subjective opinions about what those things are. And I like asking these questions because, one, I like to instigate arguments, but two, I also like to understand how people view things. Because as a storyteller, I go, who's in my audience and who's not in my audience, and it's fine. It's totally fine if you're not in Zack Snyder's audience. There's nothing wrong with that. By the way, we are going to get to a lantern question that was asked by a Facebook user, and I cannot tell who that Facebook user is. So if you want to leave your name in the comments,
it's Matt Kim. I'm on Facebook, so I can
there
see
you
Matt.
go. What's up, Matt?
Matt Kim, and then also Mary asked about, or she said, can't wait for more Martian Hunter.
Okay, so we're going to get into Martian
Manhunter
Manhunter in this, and lanterns in just a minute. But before I do that, I don't think Tim is. You haven't asked me this question yet, Tim. What do you think about this film in terms of art?
I think I'm going to land with Daryl on this question a little bit. Just that I liked watching it. It was a great couple hours for my Saturday afternoon. But if we want to stick with the definition for the moment of art questioning or calling into meaning or pointing to something more than it is, I don't know that this movie did that. We got some glimpses of it with Flash and Cyborg. Maybe even Superman or Wonder Woman, but between Batman and and Aquaman, not really, or at least not yet. And so, yeah, I liked it, but I don't know that I would call it good art. And I think that's okay.
Yeah.
It did what I wanted it to do.
I think so. For me, the way I would answer this question is that I think that there are moments of phenomenal art. Actually, I think there are moments of the pinnacle of visual storytelling. Now, can you put together a string of moments, or do you just have a bunch of different music videos, right? And that's a good question, and I think that's where Snyder tends to fail for me personally. And that speaks to what Mike was saying. It's like, you can give me one great visual moment, but if you didn't give me the character and the humanity around it, then does it really work? So why does the Wonder Woman scene work for me? Why do I consider that actually great art? Because the way that Wonder Woman is introduced sets her up as a hero. Then we say, well, what makes her, how does she continue forth with that heroic behavior? And the answer is she spends more time saving all of the other people than she does actually trying to beat up on the other people, the other guys. If there was a different person in that scene, they might care a lot more about defeating the evil people and not about saving the young kids, or for example, right? And so the way that she approaches that battle, and the way that battle is filmed, whether or not you think that there's too much slow-mo, I'm like, give me more slow-mo. This is fantastic. I love the way that this plays itself out. So I think that there are great moments. One of the things I've said too is that I think Zack Snyder has directed the best Batman scene on film, and that's the one where the two police officers walk down, and there's all the young girls who are trapped behind the cell block, and then the guys are like, they want to stay in there, and the guys are like, what are you talking about? And they turn around, and Batman's up in the rafters, and he takes off. It just puts Batman as this horrific, scary character, and I think that it's just a great embodiment, a visual embodiment, without having to say many words at all about who that character is supposed to be. So I think Zack does that really well. Now, can he string together how? So I'm answering the question and saying, yeah, I really like this, and so I love some of the moments. But if I were to argue the other side of it and be Team Mike, I would have said, well, he doesn't put all these things together super well. In fact, you could argue, and I saw someone did online, the last scene, despite the fact that you guys have said it's one of the best scenes in the film, it is complete, what word do I want to use? Indulgence. Because that film's never getting made. Yeah, it's never getting made. That film we're never going to see the light of day, most likely. So what did he do? He's like, well, thanks for letting me make my movie, but here's all the other things I would have done. So maybe the fans can give me another movie to be made, right? So just putting that out there. So we're gonna go ahead and end with this last question that came from Matt. So thanks for the question, Matt. Thanks for joining in. And Mary mentioned it too, because Mary mentioned she can't wait for more Martian Manhunter. So where Bruce meets Martian Manhunter, Matt was expecting them to actually have some lanterns come in as well. So what happened there? Why didn't we see more lanterns? The only lantern we saw got his hand chopped off. Yeah. So anybody want to tackle that? Anybody want to jump in and give their opinion for how that functions?
Technically, we saw two lanterns. We saw the one in the fight scene, and then there was one in the nightmare scene who was lying dead in the rubble.
Oh.
And the one who's lying dead in the rubble was a lantern named Kilowog, and he's actually more recognizable than the other one we saw. That's how big a nerd I am. But as far as why they weren't more included, I don't know for sure. I'm not in Zack's head, but I think it would have been too much. I mean, we already had to accept Atlanteans and Amazons and all these other types of people groups. And so to also have to accept that there's this cosmic space force that regulates everything in the universe just would have been a whole nother level of at least another hour added to the movie, probably. So I think it would have been too much. It would have been cool. I still want to see a good version of Green Lantern on screen. And hopefully
A good version of Green Lantern doesn't exist on screen.
Don't waste my time. So, and hopefully HBO Max will give us that eventually. As far as
Daryl, you're so sassy.
We've already talked about this. As far as the Martian Manhunter thing, I was so happy to see Martian Manhunter on screen. That was my biggest joyful moment. It made me so happy. But I will say, from a story standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense. It is complete indulgence, completely pointless. And if you go back and connect it to that character, General Swanwick, that he was supposedly posing himself as,
Back
it
from
makes
Man
no
of Steel,
sense
right?
whatsoever.
Back from Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Isn't he the one that shows up at the end? Yeah.
Totally nonsensical, but it was super fun to see him. So,
I mean, fan service is okay every now and then, right?
yeah, and that's what this movie was for me. It was 4 hours of fan service, and I appreciated the heck out of it. So,
Mike, what were you gonna say?
I think the Lanterns thing is actually a good move to have them just in that PlayStation cutscene we got for 25 minutes in Chapter 2. And then have Steppenwolf be like, oh, there's no lanterns here. So we'll be like, that's kind of that world building that's very cool. Like, hint at shit. You don't have to, like, follow every lead. Just hint at it, and that's very cool. The Martian Manhunter, both of his scenes, I love that character. I think he's great. Oh, Lord, was it dumb. To have a beautiful moment between Martha Kent and Lois, and then have it ruined because it's just this creep who nobody knows manipulating them, and he's like, Lois, the world needs you too. Why? How do you know the world needs her, Martian Manhunter? You're this general/Martian. How do you know they need this reporter? And then at the end, he's just like, hey, Batman, you proved I should help. But he kind of helped earlier. Where the hell was he throughout all these giant fights? Now he's like, I should help. Like, and Batman, who is very paranoid, it didn't show a character growth moment. It felt lazy for him to be like, cool. Welcome
we could
to
use
the
your
team,
help.
Martian Manhunter.
Yeah.
And then his introduction of his name is like, and some people call me Martian Manhunter. Like, it was all just like, dude, you have zero oversight. Do whatever you want. And this felt like a studio exec shoving more stuff in.
Also, just saying the name Martian Manhunter was a bad call. I would have gone with John Jones.
Yeah.
It was like, it didn't make any sense. And also, he says that he's been sitting and watching this whole time, and now it's time for me to get involved. Well, you got involved like 3 movies ago when you were posing as this general who was trying to hold Superman back. Like, it just makes no sense whatsoever. But I was so happy to see him. I don't even care.
Yeah.
And there you go.
So going back to the lanterns question too, like, why weren't there lanterns showing up? And he did hint at it. There's no lanterns in this world to protect this world or whatever. I don't think that DC, in regards to the DCEU. So again, this might be more of an executive decision than anything else, but I think that they're very scared of touching the Green Lantern issue because they botched the first one so bad. And so the more you bring that up, the more it makes people go like, oh, great, Ryan Reynolds is going to show up or something, right?
It's also just a crazy difficult story to tell.
Sure.
Like, it's so big and so massive and so huge in scope and so specific that it's going to be really hard to translate.
One of the problems DC has is that its characters are so powered, they're so super powered, that when you team them together, you have to have something that's like almost ludicrous in its powered ability. I just think about it in terms of, like, you think about how powerful Cyborg is. We talked about that earlier. The Green Lanterns can make whatever the hell he wants to make out of green energy, right? It's like, it's crazy. It's like, how do you deal with this? And I think that to your point, Daryl, it'd be almost impossible to include all of those things. However, to Matt's point, they threw Martian Manhunter in there, so why not throw a lantern in, right? So it's just a little inconsistent. And I think that that's partially because of studio interference, partially because Zack wasn't going in that direction, and that is just what it is. So, Tim, what do you think?
Well, and on the issue of what you just said about when you get the Justice League together, they are so insanely powerful that the threat has to match. Rewind however many years it's been since Man of Steel came out, and that was my one critique of Man of Steel with my friends, having seen that movie, is, okay, where do you go from here now? Because the climax of their first movie leveled a city. which is, I mean, they did more damage in that first movie than the entire first chapter leading up to the first Avengers movie did collectively. And, you know, that's setting a really high bar for yourself to follow suit. And I don't think they've lived up to that yet. Sort of with the Snyder Cut, in that Darkseid wins. Briefly. But Darkseid wins. And they have to get into the I'm going to say messy narrative of Flash being able to rewind time, because I think that is probably a surprise to a lot of people. But I don't really think they've matched that on the destruction scale. Definitely on the stakes scale, but maybe not on the destruction scale. And I think that is maybe evident of their broad lack of preparation across the DC EU. Yeah. And I think you're right that the Lanterns being able to conjure sort of whatever they would like throws that out of proportion even more of a standpoint of what are actually the stakes here and the power levels, and putting that in a context that works in a movie and isn't hyper confusing for the viewer who doesn't read the comics.
The Lanterns are also, it's just way easier to tell a Green Lantern story with splash pages and comic panels than it is with a person on screen who's moving constantly. Like, it's just, the mechanics of it are so weird and foreign, and using this ring to create all this stuff. Like, in a comic, you just have cool single shots and that's it. You're good to go. In a movie, you can't get away with that. So
right. That's a really good point. Well, I'm going to close out the show there because we've already gone about 100. We've already gone about an hour and 20 minutes. So before we close out, Mike, why don't you tell the folks about where they can find you and find the shows that you're on?
Totally. You can find the Superhero Show wherever you get your podcast, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on over wherever your podcatcher is. And again, we watch and review literally every single live-action TV show based on comics and comic book properties. I'm also on Movie of the Year, where every season we pick a different year, build a bracket, and make them fight to find the best movie of any given year. Nice. And let's hang out on social media. I'm on Twitter and on Instagram at Microphone-yo. That's Microphone Yo.
Love it. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you again, too. Yeah, of course. Daryl, always good to see you back in the studio. We'll have to get you back in here more often, man.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
Especially because you have a cooler backdrop than I have for the next 3 months.
I worked hard on this over the last year. So
I look like I'm at a winery or something. I don't know what's going on. All right, Sandra, good to see you. Tim, good to see you. And that's it for today's show. Don't forget to subscribe to the Story Geeks podcast on YouTube or your preferred podcast provider. Special thanks again to Mike for joining us today and for supporting our show. If you'd like to support this show and unlock the ability to join in, you can find more info at thestorygeeks.com. You'll also be able to find Ashley Paul's articles over there, which have been really, really good. So highly recommend you check out at thestorygeeks.com. We'll be back next week. Until then, I hope you have as much fun geeking out over great stories as we did today. Bye, everybody.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.